Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the opening kickoff event for the 2021 Harrisburg Book Festival, hosted by the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with the Scholar and the festival, and as always, I am live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, at the bookstore for our virtual events. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsors for the festival: Messiah University School of Arts, Culture, and Society, Bowers Writers House at Elizabethtown College, Susquehanna University Department of English and Creative Writing, WITF, and AAUW Harrisburg. The book festival would not be possible without their support, enthusiasm, and commitment to the literary arts. Please check out our website at hbgbookfest.com for more information on our sponsors. I'd also like to give the book festival a solid plug here. We have, as of today, put up an outdoor tent with over 10,000 books priced at $1, $2, and $3, which will take place Wednesday to Sunday of this week across from the bookstore in the grass lot. The bookstore will be open as well, and we'll also be hosting a virtual event every evening through Sunday. If you're local or regionally located, we'd love to see you. This is a huge time of the year for the bookstore. It takes a lot of work and preparation, so please, please, please come out, support your indies, support Kate, buy your book, and we hope you come away with another book or three after this weekend. But at this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for this evening's program. Our interviewer tonight is Sharon Salzberg. Sharon is a central figure in the field of meditation, a world-renowned teacher and New York Times bestselling author. She has played a crucial role in bringing meditation and mindfulness practices to the West and into mainstream culture since 1974, when she first began teaching. She is a co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, and the author of several books, including the New York Times bestseller Real Happiness, her seminal work Loving Kindness, and Real Happiness at Work. Renowned for her down-to-earth teaching style, Sharon offers a secular modern approach to Buddhist teachings, making them instantly accessible. She is a regular columnist for On Being, a contributor to Huffington Post, and the host of her own podcast, The Meta Hour. Also, a quick plug for Sharon's latest book. It's in hardcover. It's titled Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World. Look in the chat room in just a moment, and I'll provide a link for you. Of course, our featured author tonight is Kate Johnson. Kate teaches classes and retreats integrating Buddhist meditation, somatics, social justice, and creativity at leading meditation centers, universities, and cultural institutions around the country. Kate also works as a culture change consultant, partnering with organizations to help them achieve greater diversity and sustainability. She's a graduate of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's 4-year teaching training, as well as an utterly unprofessional dancer and performer who earned a BFA in dance from the Alvin Ailey School at Fordham University and an MA in Performance Studies from NYU. Of course, why we're here tonight, Kate's new book. It's titled Radical Friendship: 7 Ways to Love Yourself and Find Your People in an Unjust World. I get to read just one blurb. This one's from Jack Kornfield, who writes, quote, "Radical Friendship is a wise, ennobling sanctuary of a book. It invites our heart to go deep into friendship, justice, love, and conscience. It reminds us of the beauty we can create with one another," end quote. So some quick housekeeping real quick. If you have a question for Kate or Sharon, please use the Q&A box towards the bottom of the screen below our faces here. We'd love to hear from you, so ask away at any point and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible towards the end of the program. And lastly, most importantly, if you're interested in purchasing a copy of Radical Friendship, here it is once again. We'd love for you to purchase it through the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. Once again, that is the #1 way to support the festival, this event series, and the bookstore. For all our festival books, we're offering free media mail shipping with discount code HBG Bookfest. So look in the chat room in just a moment and I'll provide a link there for you, or simply head to hbgbookfest.com. Again, free shipping with code HBGBookfest at checkout. But now, without further ado, the Harrisburg Book Festival presents Kate Johnson and Sharon Salzberg.
Wow, thank you so much. I wish I was there physically, but this is a nice alternative to that impossibility. So I'm wondering, Kate, if you want to begin us with a short meditation.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's such a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here with you, Sharon. So yeah, we can do just a brief contemplation, 2-3 minutes to kind of help us land here and warm up our hearts and get ready for this conversation. And yeah, for those of you who are joining, if you just take the attitude that you can't do this wrong. And take a deep breath. You can stretch out your body. Feel free to close your eyes if that feels okay, or you can just lower them to the space in front of you. And let's take a couple deep breaths if that works for your body. And as we begin, I'd like to invite you to name to yourself and bring to mind a quality that feels important to you in a friend. One quality or characteristic that you really value, that when you think the word friend, this kind of pops up in your mind. And we can just consider whatever pops up first is a good one to go with. And now, having chosen just one of the qualities that you feel is important to have in friendship, one that you value, see if you can imagine it in your mind's eye, like almost like a neon sign that's lit up in front of you. So I see the word or the phrase written out in front of you. And now imagine that that sign gets smaller and brighter and smaller and brighter, and that there's a little kind of window in front of your heart that it can slide into. So now that quality of friendship is lit up and illuminated in your own chest, in your own heart space. Just feel what it's like to have that quality circulating through your system and shining in your heart. And take a moment to consider what it might be like to fully embody and express this quality in your relationship with yourself. What would that look like? What would it feel like? What might you do? How might you be? And then think about what it might be like to embody this quality fully in your relationships with the people that you interact with most often in the day. uh, Family members, neighbors, colleagues. Just imagine shining this quality into each of those interactions. Bring the felt experience of what that might be like to mind. And expanding further now to start to feel into what it might be like to express this quality fully in your relationship, even with people that you don't know, having to cross paths with, share space with in some way. And as we close here, just connecting with the wish, if you like, that you might more fully express this quality in all of these areas as a result of our conversation and contemplation on friendship tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. I always like to try to begin that way, just to more fully arrive, each of us. It's a really good thing. So congratulations, massive congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
And I'm quite curious about a number of things. Maybe to start with, can you read us that 7-part description of a good friend?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I know it by heart. So
Oh yeah, don't even pick up the book, just recite it.
All the time. But yeah, so the Buddha, in it's the text is called the Metta Sutta. It's a sutta on what it is to be a good friend. And the Buddha says in this passage that there are 7 qualities that you should look for in a friend, someone who has these qualities worth associating with. And he says that it is someone who gives what is hard to give, does what is hard to do, endures what is hard to endure. And it's someone who tells you their secrets, who keeps your secrets. When misfortune strikes, the spiritual friend won't abandon you. And when you're down and out, the spiritual friend won't look down on you. And then he reiterates, if you find someone with these 7 qualities, they're worth associating with, and they're worth really emulating, trying to be more like. Yeah. So I just thought it was beautiful. And when I read it, I thought, wow, I want to be that kind of friend. I want to have that kind of friend. I don't know how to do that. And no one, no one ever really taught me explicitly. And so it was really such a pleasure to, you know, pay attention to the people who are excellent friends in my life, and to reflect on my own experiences, and to reflect on the Buddhist teachings, and yeah, try to bring some of those qualities forth more fully in myself.
What was it, seeing that list, that inspired you to write a book on this topic? Is it?
Well, the invitation to write the book came out of actually another talk that I'd given at a Buddhist conference. It was kind of like a Buddhism meets like neuroscience meets technology conference. So, I was kind of like, well, what am I doing here? But I am only one of those things is a part of my life. But someone on the board of an organization I was working with suggested that I write a proposal, and the proposal angle that I took was that mindfulness is actually a technology that we can use to turn towards the arising of thoughts and sensations as they occur when we have a relational encounter, in such a way that we might be able to like interrupt or even undo implicit bias. And this was right after the Black teenager Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, Missouri. And yeah, I think it felt like collectively as a country, we were really learning about this mechanism of misperception and how dangerous it can be, and how deeply rooted it can be. And so that was the talk that I gave. And then the editor asked if I'd like to write a book, and I said yes. And I didn't I had a sense that there were some other people working on books that were really about kind of the neuroscience of how that moment of perception happens. And I'm not a neuroscientist, and I thought, well, what do I have to say about this? And really, my experience was primarily as a community member, as a dedicated practitioner, as someone who was doing some like cultural organizing and some organizing of meditation and wellness communities around like social justice issues. And so I thought, I think that in those spaces, we were doing our best to be good allies, and we were trying to have discussions on what does allyship mean. But my sense was that what we really meant and what we really longed for when we were talking about allyship was friendship, was like a deep, intimate and intimate friendship that was grounded in a sense of equity and justice. And so that's what made me want to write the book about it. When I read that description, I thought, oh, maybe that's a key, maybe that's a clue. And the idea that it came within the Buddhist teachings was also deeply appealing, and I find that more and more, the more I study and practice, I think, it's so much of what I'm looking for is already, here in the Dharma. So that's kind of how I happened.
And I'm really curious about whether hearing that list, because I found myself resonating to different parts of it in different ways. Something that went in deep was somebody who will tell you their secrets but not betray yours, because it evoked such a sense of trust and being willing to be vulnerable and things like that. So I'm just wondering if, as you read it now by memory, if there are one or two or maybe more of those attributes that really resonates with you.
Yeah, I mean, all of them do in their own way. And I know what you mean about like hearing the list and kind of having these like different kind of sensory experiences, hearing each one. Um, um, I guess two that are beautiful and feel meaningful to me right now. One is this first one about gives what is hard to give, and points me to the Buddhist teachings on generosity, which I always heard, from my teachers over and over. This is the first thing the Buddha taught. It's really important, and I really thought it was primarily about giving money, in part because the most of the time I heard about that, at least in the early days, it was when I was on retreat, and it was the end of the retreat, and people were like, "Okay, so now you donate to the teachers. This is generosity," and in the book and thinking about relationships, I talk about giving money, which I think is important. And when we're talking about friendships that lead to liberation, not just in our own spiritual life, but also thinking about the kind of social and political landscape, I don't think we can talk about that and generosity without talking about redistributing wealth. And I found that I also had this big need to talk about what it is to give time and what it is to give attention, and how hard that can be, and how related they can feel to money in a capitalist society. And so I think that's one that feels big for me now as both a friend in a time of continued pandemic and uprising, that I have a lot of friends who are going through stuff. It's a hard time, and folks who like need my time and attention. And then I'm also a new parent, and this little being, doesn't speak the language that we speak here, like can't go to the bathroom without me. Like there's just whole bunch, she really needs a lot of time and attention. And so I've really been in deep contemplation about what it is to actually extend myself beyond maybe even what I think is my own boundary, in order to be of benefit to someone I really care about. And it's an interesting contemplation, because if I tip over and like too far over that boundary, and I begin to give in something that I don't actually have to give, like I don't actually have the time or attention to give, then that's not generosity anymore. That's like, a recipe for resentment, basically. So that's been a big part of my practice. And then the other one that I think really moves me these days is when misfortune strikes, the friend won't abandon you. And this question of like, loyalty and what it is to stay with a friendship over time through ups and downs, and also what it means to be in friendship in a way that doesn't require that I abandon myself, and that also feels like a subtle place of practice.
Actually, I want to pursue that in a minute, but before we get there, it's such a having had a book come out mid-pandemic myself, I know it's such an extremely odd time in so many ways, for that very adventure in life. And of course, you are a new mom as well, so there's a lot going on. But one of the things that happened for me when Real Change was coming out, it was supposed to come out, I think, in June of 2020, and the publisher postponed it till September of 2020. And in that interval, a friend of mine was reading it in order to write an excerpt of it. And he said to me, I really kind of liked the book, but I kept reading those examples and thinking, that's what made you anxious? Wait till you see what's coming. So I went to the publisher and I said, would it be okay with you if I wrote a preface, like a new, because everything else had been written, before the pandemic. And so if I wrote a preface to somehow try to contextualize this, whatever was following in the book, into our time. And they said, okay. So the main question I was asking myself over and over again in order to write that preface is the question I want to pose to you. And I kept saying to myself, what's still true?
Mm.
You know, in a time of like upheaval and loss and grief and anger and everything that was happening, anxiety, like what's still true? Like, in other words, what's holding me up?
Mm-hmm.
What am I counting on? What's sustaining me? And I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask you. I mean, what I came to was really some of the very tools I've been practicing forever. I thought, look at that, lo and behold, it's still working, to get more centered, to be more spacious and kinder and, things like that. I thought, yeah, even in extreme times, it seems very important.
Yeah. Yeah. What a beautiful question. You know, so the first thing that came up for me when you said that is interdependence. I thought, like, wow, interdependence is still true, because it was for me, in because I became pregnant so early in the pandemic, and I as I mentioned to you before, I thought we'd be done with this by the summertime. So I thought, like, no problem. Like, I'll have a baby in February. Everything will be back to normal. It totally wasn't. It was the pandemic. It was the uprising. It was the, elections. And I remember having this conversation with my dad where I had signed up to be an election protector, where you can, because I live in Pennsylvania, and there were talks about people coming from other parts of the state into Philadelphia to like harass voters or confuse them. And so, I was signing up to and this is something I would typically do in an election time. And my dad basically said that if he had to come to Philadelphia and drag me off of the away from the school himself, that he would do it, just basically saying, like, it's not a good time for you to be engaging your regular political practices in this way, because you're carrying precious cargo. And I say that to say that I have I was feeling really guilty for not being out in the streets. And it's where I wanted to be, and where I saw friends and people I care about, and it just broke my heart not to be able to join them, and put my body on the line and for what I believed in, and to just make visible to myself and to other people that we're not alone, and caring about things that we care about, and being willing to take risks for them. And because of health reasons, it wasn't appropriate for me. And so interdependence, in the sense of it takes all of these different roles in order to make a revolution, right? And that there are ways in which there's times in our life and times in our life cycle where each of us might be more on the front lines. There's times where we might kind of be resting and allow other people to step forward. There's people who are more well suited to policy work. There are people who are more well suited to chaining themselves to trees. There are people who are more well suited to teaching meditation, and just the feeling of not having to put my cape on and save the world by myself, but being a part of a team of people who is actually a very large team, who are all working for change, and who I believe will win, was something that got me through that time.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I want to go back to being a friend to yourself, to oneself, and the primacy of that. Because that also implies being a friend to ourselves when we're really down, or we're not that nice, or we're, like consumed with some really difficult feeling. I have such a memory of you and I in New York City. You were leading this evening with some of the people who were involved in the striking fast food movement, people who were striking. They worked in different fast food places, and they were going on strike to argue for $15 an hour minimum wage and the right to unionize, and you did a great job like leading this evening, and there were these two other women sitting up there with you, and you said something about how reluctant people often were in kind of meditative circles to recognize their own anger,
Mm.
and how difficult that could be because there was often this feeling, well, I shouldn't feel that. And the two women were completely confused. And then you said something like, speaking to us in the audience, which is really what the comment was for, or who the comment was for, you said, you know who you are. It was such a great moment for a moderator of a discussion to bring forth. But that doesn't necessarily mean one wants to be driven by our fear and our anger and
Right.
overcome by it. But there's some quality of friendship that is very different than our demeaning ourselves or being ashamed of what we feel.
Mm.
That seems very important.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't I don't remember exactly that moment, but I'm so happy you do. And yeah, I hadn't thought about befriending. Um, I hadn't reflected on that moment and that dilemma, I think, of many modern meditators of, okay, I'm doing this practice because I want to be calm, and I want to be peaceful, and also sometimes I don't feel that way, and what happens when that happens, um, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to look back on that and, oh yeah, maybe it's uh mm, I don't want to say a failure to befriend, but that there's like some um a, almost like aggression or denial or pushing away towards the feeling itself, which is of course one of aggression or denial or pushing away. So it's this kind of double layer. And um, you know, I I have not yet experienced a state in which, fear and anger don't arise for me. Not all the time, but sometimes they come up, and it seems to be that these are, human emotions, and sometimes a perfectly reasonable response to what's happening. Like, I forget who said, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. But do you remember?
No, it's in my book.
um, but yeah, it's that kind of thing. And that also, pushing it away or pretending not to be angry doesn't actually seem to work. That there's something about not befriending those emotions in the way of not trying to push them away or to make them seem otherwise or ignoring them, but actually acknowledging that they're here, and not judging them or trying to fix them, that allows them to have their own kind of evolutionary process. And I feel like if there's this kind of denial, shaming, pushing down, pushing away, they always kind of are there, troubling the water under the surface, and that's a lot of energy to keep those things down, and we actually need our energy for other things right now. So I think it's like not a great strategy, although I understand it. Um, and um, and it does seem like, not only are anger and fear natural, they do get us moving in a certain way sometimes. I know that too much can make us kind of frozen, or paralyzed, but they can wake us up, they can get us moving. It's just that they're also not the most sustainable form of energy, to power, like, to keep us moving towards change in a long-term kind of way. So I think there's something about befriending them that might allow them to transform into something that is more sustainable. That in feeling fear, we might discover that there's something we really care about, that is worth protecting, and that caring and feeling of protecting is something that could keep us going for quite a while. same thing with, anger. It might be that a boundary is crossed, and that there's somewhere where we feel we have to draw the line. There's like an ethical, moral obligation, and that kind of thing is something that can keep us moving for a while. I remember during that time, I was in a conversation with Michael King from Strong Economy for All, and he was saying that his experience was, we were on a bus on the way to Albany in to participate in a I don't know how to say it. It wasn't storming because they knew we were coming. we occupied the Capitol building a little bit for a period of time in New York State for this campaign to achieve, actually not even like minimal wages for fast food workers. And he said to me that his experience is that when people of faith get involved in political movements, that's when politicians get really nervous, because we can be inexhaustible. It's like we're working for a higher employer, you know what I mean? And that's when they get really concerned. So I think that if we can find a way to meet that fear and anger and transform it into something that can really sustain us, we can be quite a force.
It's fantastic. It also really reminds me of, when people are teaching self-compassion, which a lot of people mistake for laziness or not having values or something, but really is a force. The example they use a lot in the training is like, well, how would you speak to your friend if they had just said that? Or how would you speak to your friend if they had just done that? And it's usually a great deal kinder, more kind than the way we speak to ourselves. So I think exploring, it's such a rich exploration. What does it mean to be a friend to yourself?
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate what you said about self-compassion and it not being, I, I think there is this, and I know about this because I have it, but this idea that being harsh with myself and judgmental and shamey is a way to catalyze transformation. And um, I wish I knew where I got that. And I wish I knew where we got that collectively. It doesn't actually seem to work, but it's kind of the fallback when I'm not paying attention. And I think that this unwillingness to offer compassion to oneself can kind of come from that idea that if you offer compassion, then there's no impetus for change or to grow spiritually. Um, but I just, it seems that everybody deserves compassion, and it also seems that it's something that can make growth possible. Um, yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the last times I was in a gathering physically with people, there were a couple of them more after the one I'm about to describe, but this was, I think, third to the last. It was in California in February of 2020, and it was with a small group of people teaching, and there was a neuroscientist there. And based on something I said, I guess she said, the brain filled with shame cannot learn.
Whoa.
Which I thought was really interesting, because we think it's the ticket to really improving, but maybe we can't learn. And what we really want is change, in some way. So then I also want to, especially because of the time we're in, but even before this particular weird time, there was so much written about and concern about people being lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was called an epidemic, and not just in the States. There were, different countries that were using that terminology. And and just the nature of being lonely as compared to being alone or being in solitude, and all of those attendant feelings. Because as I told you earlier, I was so struck by that passage in your book when you were talking about loneliness and ways to address it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really moved by the the reports that were coming out of the World Health Organization too, and just struck by, wow, this is even before the pandemic. So imagine what it's like now, but that piece about uh, the possibility that, and actually the frequency of folks feeling lonely even when they're not alone, even when they have plenty of social connections, both in person and online, feeling really lonely. And what was that about? And this that this contemplation ended up in the chapter on telling your secrets, which, as you know, is kind of about allowing ourselves to be seen and known, and um, telling secrets, both as showing up in our full self, showing up as who we really are, and also being willing to speak up, not only about the details of our personal lives, but also about societal truths that need to change, um, and our views on them. And so yeah, it kind of ended up in this larger, kind of section about coming out. Like I talked about uh, being queer, and eventually coming out to my family members, and and then, like, later on in my life, ending up in a relationship with a cis man in a heterosexual relationship, and being in a space where I could just like not mention it. You know what I mean? Like, people in my life today wouldn't necessarily know if I didn't say it. And yet, um, there are like so many queer and especially trans folks who are being targeted for violence on a daily, um, and have been for years and years. And um, not only for my own comfort of being able to feel good about being known by the people in my life for real, and not hiding a part of my history and my like um my my way of being in the world, but also because I have the sense that if everybody who was a little bit queer came out, then people would really get that, like, their favorite teacher, coach in high school, or neighbor, is a part of this group of people that they think, oh, I don't know anyone like that, and I can't relate to culture or legislation that wants to protect people who are queer, gender nonconforming. And so yeah, I mean, all that to loop back around to loneliness, I think I didn't talk about this in the book, but my understanding is that, and you can probably tell me more on this because um, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. The My understanding is that the Buddha talked about that we can some of the two of the main roots of suffering. One is this the desire to be seen and known and to be somebody, and then there's another one that's actually a desire to kind of like hide and not be seen and known. Is that how Baba and Vibhava Tanha work?
Well, that's a very contemporary, psychologically astute, sensitive awareness of it, from what is actually a very arcane sort of teaching,
Okay.
But it was good. I like that.
Well, my sense is that there is this I'll have to look back at it, but there is this sense of both wanting to be seen and known, and also like um a fear of being seen and known, but that if we're willing to step into risk and allow ourselves to be who we really are, we get to see how our friends and the people we want to be close to respond to us. And if we're lucky, we get to find out that they embrace us for who we really are. And that's such a good feeling, and one that I hope when it feels safe enough, we can collectively try to step into and not hold ourselves back from the kind of love that's actually maybe available for us, and we just don't know it because we
Mhm.
never let ourselves open up to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's very true and very beautiful, because there's risk taking in so many ways to be a friend or to accept a friend, to take it in, to be a friend to ourselves. So it's great. I think it's so wonderful that you focused on that topic and that you brought it to where you brought it. So
I
thank
can't
you.
wait for your book. Like it's
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a while. I said earlier, that I'm not in that happy stage of thinking I'm done. I'm like, oh, why am I writing another book? Like, different
well,
stage.
you mentioned this is your 12th, and so I think this people keep saying to me, "Oh, your first book," and I'm like, "It might be my last." It's really not easy, and there is that part in the middle where I just thought, man, this this is never going to happen. I'm just going to have to give the money back. But, I
You did it.
well, I'm glad you keep doing it. I don't know if I will, but it gives me me hope to see you kind of going back into that place of I don't know again and again, and then
Yeah. Well,
discovering.
thank you. Thank you. So why don't we open up for questions or comments if people are using the Q&A button as we.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kate. To our audience members, if you have a question for Sharon or Kate, please use the Q&A button below our faces towards the bottom of the screen. One quick plug: Radical Friendship, paperback original, midtownscholar.com or hbgbookfest.com, or simply just look in the chat room. I provide a link there for you. Free media mail shipping with HBG Bookfest at checkout. We've got a lot of good questions here, so I'm just going to dive in. And Sharon, like we mentioned earlier, feel free to jump in at any point if you'd like. But our first question here, and we talked a little bit about this, but this one's from Tara. And Tara says, for both authors, could you talk a bit about the importance or primacy of self-compassion as it relates to friendship and connection and intimacy with others?
Yeah. I mean, Sharon, I'd love to know what you think about it.
I was like, Kate, you start. It's your evening. Well, I mean, I think, self-compassion is really interesting because it's not something we need to cultivate in times of triumph. It's when we've fallen down, when we've disappointed somebody or ourselves, when we have to find a way to be more resilient, to go on, and that seems so connected to what I was saying earlier. Like, if we need our friend to be like totally together all the time, that's a pretty limited definition of friendship. And if we feel we have to present as totally together all the time, well, I think that's a big societal mandate. And we hear that, some of us, from very early on in childhood, like, hang in there, you've got to be. Or my favorite way of saying it is, it's a dog eat dog world. Don't help anybody else. They're not going to help you, and you're on your own. And and so I think it's a critical component to really feeling close to somebody or close to ourselves, is that we can disclose the vulnerabilities and we can be kind. Kate.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, the one thing that occurred to me to add is just around this language of primacy, because I do think it's of vital importance. And my experience is that it's not always chronologically first. That does seem to be a idea that I don't know, I've just heard people say, like, oh, you have to love yourself before you can love other people. And I don't think that's true. I think that some of us learn to love ourselves because someone really loved us, and it can be, certainly like a parent or someone in our family. It can also be a teacher. It can also be a neighbor. It can also be an auntie, or, like, someone who really sees the good in us, and we can tell, and that they're kind of unwavering in their ability to see that in us and to draw it out even when we can't in ourselves. And I think that sometimes so that's one way we can find, a sense of friendliness to ourselves and self-compassion, is to really be with someone who is compassionate towards us. And another way, I think, is to, through our feelings of like love and compassion for others. I know many people who you know, often happens for someone who's like really innocent, like, you know, a pet or a child or something, but there's this feeling of kind of unconditional love and friendliness that just flows out, you know, when we're with this being. And then there's something about um, being able to generate that so freely that it, it kind of that sense of like loving so freely makes us feel loving and lovely and lovable in this roundabout way.
Mhm.
So just to say there's many doorways in, and they're all good.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
This next question is from Jocelyn, again for both authors. How do you approach incorporating the latest findings in neuroscience into your meditation teachings and practices? Is it something you're constantly needing to stay on top of, stay connected with, et cetera, et cetera? Kate, if we want to start with you.
Darn it. Um, you know, I think there are a couple findings from neuroscience that continue to be resonant for me. One is the Dr. Rick Hanson's work around negativity bias, and just the understanding that the the mind for evolutionary reasons often focuses on what's not right and not good in us and in the world, and that there has to be in order um, to balance that, like a intentional kind of drawing forth of what is good and what is right in us in the world, in order to actually just see clearly and see in a balanced way. So that one continues to resonate for me, and I think about it a lot. um, I I know that for many people, the findings around neuroscience are really inspiring, and it's not that they're not inspiring for me, but I tend to be, I think, as practitioners go, I tend to be on the more like devotional variety. And so for me, what often really inspires me is um, seeing people who have perfected these qualities in their own practice or gotten pretty darn close to it, and just wanting to be more like them and seeing the way that they're able to, like, the good they're able to bring in the world, and to just know that that's possible. So I'm not like anti-science or anything like that. I think it's really good, but I don't feel pressured to keep up with all of it, although I am very excited when it seems to affirm something that I've learned by watching one of my mentors or in my own direct experience. Yeah, that's how I relate to it.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I see the neuroscience and just the science, because it's not only neuroscience right now, we've moved on to genetic expression and way meditation may be influencing that thing and other things as well, the immune system and so on. But I see it as another language, and it's a way of expressing hopefully some personally witnessed truths in a way that makes sense to all kinds of people who are not moved by the poetry of it, or something that we may use a kind of language to express our experience in it, but that actually makes sense, that particular way of expression. And so it's very exciting that
Mm.
that it exists.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that it's not just the neuroscience, because I do feel really inspired by biology. Like, I do feel really inspired by learning about the way that, you know, um, plants communicate and will send nutrients to another plant that is suffering, and like the way that the natural world seems to have this incredible um, like rhythm and architecture of care really speaks to my heart. So yeah, thanks for that reminder.
I'm going to try to consolidate into one pandemic question. So we can
Okay.
cover the pandemic into one question.
One massive pandemic question.
Yeah, right. this one's from Catherine. Catherine says, I've read that the pandemic has allowed people to be content with a smaller social circle. Any thoughts on how physical separation has helped or diminished friendships, and how can we adjust going forward? And then another one is just how did social isolation change how you approach this book, or did you learn something more about friendship because of the isolation? If you need me to repeat it all, just let me know.
Sharon, would you like to go first, or you like me to?
Oh, well, I think I'll do I can address the first one, but I think the question about the book was really for you.
Okay.
Because we are here to celebrate your book. And I actually would like to hear, what Kate has to say about this as well, because even before the pandemic, when I would read about the role of social connection in healing and different clinical situations, I always felt it couldn't just be a numbers game. Like, I only have 2 friends, I need 5, then I'm safe. I mean, and sometimes it's expressed that way, like you need this many connections, but I always felt that didn't resonate so strikingly with me, because I felt it was like an inner sense of connection. Certainly, I've known people who lead pretty solitary lives, but they're immensely connected, both internally and when they encounter somebody, and it's a genuine state of care and connection, and so that's really what I try to focus on. The loneliness thing was fascinating, because society has shifted so much that there's this book, which was a great book, but also super great because of its title, which was Bowling Alone, by Robert Putnam, about the dissolution of bowling leagues and how ways we would normally get together in our lives were not necessarily serving anymore. There weren't that many bowling leagues, apparently, people were bowling alone, or, church or synagogue or those things, not for everybody, but for many, it was not kind of the pillar of their communal life anymore. And so this has been a long time coming in some way, and was usually exacerbated by the pandemic, but I still feel it's very much like an inner state.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say on this first question. I'm happy to hear that people feel content with a smaller social circle. I think that's true for me as well. And I know that I really focus much more on my local connections, where I live, and even in my neighborhood on my block, we suddenly had like a phone list and email thread going, which we never had before. So there was this sense that we don't know what's going to happen, but the people we're on the block with are the people that we really need to be in contact with, in terms of keeping safe and being healthy and looking out for one another. And so I actually have a lot of good experience with how the pandemic shifted my friendships, both my relationship with myself and other people. And I continue to wonder about the people who are more solitary, maybe like not charismatic, maybe like cranky or annoying, who had daily social interactions with people that might not have seemed even meaningful, but that even from going grocery shopping in person, or taking public transportation, that there's something about staying connected with people, even these small kind of passing ways, that is very healthy. And for someone that doesn't have a lot of deep friendships for a variety of reasons, to suddenly have none of those interactions, I felt, I wonder about that. I wonder how folks are doing with that. And
well, I think they're not doing very well, is the sad reality.
yeah, I guess that's probably right. And so then it makes me think, okay, so if you know, does surviving the apocalypse mean that we have to be charismatic, like have to be, an easygoing person in order to be able to have enough social relationships to get through really tough times? And that doesn't seem like that should be the case. So I wonder how we create a social fabric where everyone, regardless of temperament or personality, gets to be checked in on and taken care of, and that not to forget about people. So that's my thought. Um, and then I forgot about the second question already.
The second question was how did the social isolation like change how you approach the book, or did you learn something more about friendship because of the isolation?
um, I mean, I started writing this book way before the COVID-19, and apparently a very slow writer. So, there's a good amount of rewriting that happened while in lockdown and isolation. And how did it change things? I think one way it really changed, I hadn't thought about this. This is a great question, but one thing that I'm aware of now, is that the book about friendship became less how do I say it? I became aware that the Buddhist teachings on spiritual friendship um, could be applied and maybe even must be applied in relationships beyond the ones that I would typically think of as a friend, right? So, because I was in lockdown with my partner, my bonus kid, my and then eventually my infant child, and really not very many other people. It really became about, okay, what does it mean to be a good friend in my family? What does it mean to be a good friend to my partner, to my kids, to my neighbors, and just expanded the definition of what friendship could be for me. Uh, yeah, and I think, in a way that I think is beneficial for the book. Thanks for the question.
Um, we're just about out of time, but so I'll just ask one last question. It's a good last question. This one's from Katina. Katina writes, what takeaway do you hope people will come away with after reading your book?
Hmm. Well, I think it has a little bit to do with what I just mentioned. I hope that they'll have a sense. I hope people have a sense of how we can be good friends and have healthy friendships, and within all of our relationships, um, and a sense of how those relationships um, help us to grow, in our own hearts, but also like help us to evolve as a society. Thinking about friendship as really the building block for community, the building block for social movements. That we might be able to relate with friendship in such a way that they allow that our friendships are durable and pleasurable and allow us to stay together and to want to stay together long enough to really bring about the kind of change that we need in our world. Um, and I hope that people, you know, I know that the cultivation of those qualities, it requires effort. But my hope is that people will relate to it and experience it as a really joyful effort, and the kind of effort that makes life beautiful and meaningful. Um, and not be overwhelmed or think like, this is some book where I just have to consider all the ways I'm not doing it right, but like a way that they can see, okay, these are the places where I'm genuinely like you know um like well developed in being a good friend, and here's places where I have a little room to grow, and to be excited about that work too.
Sharon, Kate, thank you both so much for joining us for the opening night for the Harrisburg Book Festival. Thank you to our audience members out there. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your question. Once again, the book is Radical Friendship. Here it is. Head to our website, midtownscholar.com, or simply look in the chat room to the right of your screen. Click on that and you can purchase a copy of the book. Our outdoor tent sale starts tomorrow, 10 a.m. Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day through Sunday, 10,000 plus books priced at $1, $2, and $3. Please come out, support the bookstore. We'd love to see you. But I'd like to just hand it off to Sharon and Kate for the last word. So Sharon, if you want to just give the last word to our audience.
Oh, I want to thank you and congratulations on the book festival. And I was just wondering, Kate, do you have like a website or something where people were also putting in the Q&A that they wanted to be in touch with you?
Oh yeah, I do have a website. It's katejohnson.com. My email is there. My mailing list is there if you want to keep in touch that way. Yeah, and I would love it if anybody wanted to keep in touch.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.